Thank you, Tim. Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time out to join us. My name's Cassie. I work at Leeds and York Partnership, NHS Foundation Trust. My role is Strategic HR Resourcing Manager. And there's a number of my colleagues with us this morning just to talk you through a little bit around the opportunities at the Trust. We're going to go through some information here, as you can see, in relation to a bit about our services and what we do. We've got an overview of our apprenticeship opportunities and how you can access the Trust in that way. We've got a clinical psychologist this morning to talk about the assistant psychologist role, which might be suitable for graduates coming straight out of university and how you can get into that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the NHS graduate programme and how that works at our Trust. We've got our recruitment and resourcing manager here, Ian, who's going to talk to you a little bit around the system and how you can register for job alerts and actually go through the application process. And then we're going to finish off with some top tips as well about applying for the Trust. There is some dedicated time at the end for Q&A, so I know Tim mentioned you can put any questions in the chat box, feel free to do that, and then at the end, if we've got time left, then you'll be welcome to come in verbally and ask any questions to us as well. We'll also give you our email address, so if there's any questions outside of the platform today that you want to come and ask us, then you're very welcome to get in contact with us offline as well. So hopefully that's what you expected, and that's okay for everybody, and I shall hand over first of all to Claire. Oh, Claire, you're just on mute, sorry.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I often do that, apologies. Morning, everybody. My name's Claire. I work for Leeds and York, as my colleagues on the call. I'm in a leadership position at the moment in the Trust, but my background is as a clinician working as an occupational therapist. So that's how I started my career within LYPFT. And since then, I've worked through a number of different positions to the one I'm in now. And so I suppose that's an example really of somebody who's worked for the Trust for a number of years and have been given quite a number of opportunities to develop and move through into different posts and roles within the Trust. So what I'm going to do now is just talk through the Trust itself, talk about the services that we provide so you get an understanding of the range of services that we provide. A little bit about our vision and values, where we provide our services, and then I guess of relevance to you, thinking about the roles that are available within health and social care. So LYPFT, Leeds and York Foundation Trust, is a provider of mental health and learning disability services, predominantly in Leeds, but we also have quite a number of regional services which have a bigger reach, some of which are regional and some of which actually stretch across the north of England. So it's quite diverse. We are arranged into a number of different what we call service lines, so that there is a really clear sort of leadership and management for all of our services. So we work very much across the age range, so all the way from children and adolescent services. So we have what we call CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, which works up to the age of 17, right the way through a whole range of services for adults between 18 and 65. And then we also have our older people services, which is focused on providing services for people 65 and over. We also work at different stages of people's recovery in terms of their mental health needs, and also with those people with learning disability. So some people might have quite brief contact with our services. So for instance, working with our crisis team, they might have quite a brief contact with that service and then be able to move on away from services. Whereas other services might be for a longer period of time with people. So for instance, our forensic services quite often will be providing services for people over a longer period of time. And also people with a learning disability, they might even have lifelong contact with services to support them living as independently as possible. We have a number of quite what we would call, I guess, fundamental services within the Trust. So we have our acute and urgent care services, where those are people who have got really quite high needs and need to be in either an inpatient environment or have really quite high levels of support. We also have our older people services, and that includes services for people with dementia, as well as people with mental health needs who are over 65. A lot of our services are actually provided in the community, so we have an awful lot of community-based services, and we really try to provide our services as close to where people live as possible, to try to make them as accessible as they can be, rather than people coming to us. And that's quite an important aspect and principle, I guess, of how we deliver our services, that we really try to make them as available and as accessible as possible. So I thought it might be useful just to describe a few of our more specialist services. So as I mentioned before, we do have a forensic service. So that's for people who have got an offending history and need a more secure environment in terms of helping their recovery. And we also have a community forensic team as well, so working with people that have moved on from a secure environment into the community, and we work very closely with probation and other agencies to help those service users to recover. We also have a perinatal service, so that's very much focused on working with mothers who are either about to or have had a child and need extra support, and there's very much a family first approach with that. So again, we have an inpatient service specifically for mothers, and they can be with their baby in that unit. And we also have an outreach service as well, so we would follow people up once they were able to go home and work with the family to help them get the support that they need. We're really focused on being innovative and trying to take opportunities where we see that in terms of developing our services. So just a couple of examples of things that we've developed quite recently. So we have the contract at the moment for the Northern Gambling Service. So you're probably aware in the media that there's been a lot of coverage around the need for addressing people's gambling addiction. So we have that service. Another one, which is a quite recent development, is working with veterans who have got mental health needs. So people that have had some kind of career in the forces and have left and need that support. So again, that's quite a new service. And just at the moment, we are in the process of building a new children and adolescent mental health unit, which is going to be on the St Mary's Hospital site, which is in Armley, which some people may know, in the west of Leeds. And that's due to open next year. So that's a very quick, brief overview of our services, but you can go on our website and it will give you a lot more detail about all of our services if you're interested in finding out a bit more, but feel free to ask questions at the end if you want any more information about those. So in terms of our vision and our values, it's, I suppose the important thing is that we really want to provide outstanding mental health and learning disability services and be an employer of choice. So that's our kind of watchword, I guess, in terms of what we do, that we really want to focus on providing high quality care so that people can get the best opportunity to recover and to have the best standard of care that they can. So in terms of underpinning that, we have a number of values which we sign up to and which everybody that works with the trust signs up to. So the first one of those is integrity, that we really deliver our services with integrity, which is about having respect and dignity for people and just doing our best for our colleagues and our service users. So we're very clear about the fact that each value has a set of behaviours aligned to it, so that everybody's really clear about actually what that means in terms of our day-to-day work. The second one is about keeping it simple, and that can be a bit of a challenge in the NHS because it's quite a complicated place in terms of how things are organised, but we really make an effort to try to keep things simple so that it makes it easier for people to achieve their goals and do what they set out to do, whether that be patients or staff. And the final one is about being caring, and that has to be really central to all that we do, that we provide empathy and demonstrate that in all our interactions with people, and that we provide a compassionate support for people when they have contact with our services. So that's something which is relatively new in terms of the trust, our values, but it's something which we've involved people in to develop, and hopefully that gives a sense of how we approach the services that we deliver and how we approach the people that we work with. In terms of the sites and where we deliver our services, it is really quite varied because, as I said before, we have some of our services which are delivered in Leeds, some are in York, and some are either farther reaching than that as well across the north of England. So in Leeds, we have a trust headquarters, which is based up at Colton, which is just off the M1 in the north of Leeds. We have an inpatient unit, which is pictured actually on here, the Beckland Centre, and that's adjacent to the St James's Hospital site, which most people will know. We also have an inpatient unit called the Newsom Centre, which is again on another hospital site, the Seacroft Hospital site, and that's in East Leeds. Our older people services and some of the services, including perinatal services, are delivered at a place called the Mount, and that's actually quite near Leeds University, just off Clarendon Road, quite central. And then, as I mentioned previously, we also have St Mary's Hospital, which is quite a long-standing site for learning disability services, and that's over in the west of Leeds in Armley. We also have a number of other community sites in Leeds that we deliver services from, and we have a children and adolescent unit in York called Mill Lodge, and also a forensic inpatient unit in York called Clifton House. So that's just an overview of where we are. So it's quite geographically spread across Leeds, and also we have our more regional services with bases elsewhere. So hopefully you got an impression from how I've described our services that they're really quite diverse and quite a range, and that is the same in terms of the roles that are available within health and social care. There's all sorts of different aspects that you can be involved in, whether that be about clinical services and working directly with patients, but also other services like administration, IT, etc. And I'll hand over to Jo to tell you a bit more about that.
Hi everybody, my name is Jo Third, and I'm a learning and OD lead in the Trust, and I work predominantly on apprenticeships. In March 2020, there were 1.74 million people employed in the NHS, and within that there are over 350 different NHS careers. All of those roles advertised in one place, and Ian will tell you a little bit more about accessing that later on in the presentation. So as Claire just started to talk about the breadth of those different roles, so I suppose they can be divided down, I suppose, into non-clinical roles and clinical roles. And the non-clinical roles, well, all of the roles, there's so many, but just to sort of give you a flavour, as Claire said, we've got a range of admin roles, there's finance, IT, project management, workforce informatics, procurement, communications and marketing. It's huge. And then on the clinical side, the main areas are the nursing profession, allied health professionals, as Claire was explaining her background, psychology, pharmacy and medical. And I hope I've got them all. Clinical colleagues shout over me if I haven't. So just giving you a feel for that. If with looking for roles in the NHS, obviously there's various qualification requirements, but particularly on the non-clinical side, it might be that because of needing to have relevant experience, when you're looking for roles, you maybe look at a more of an entry level role. So to enable you to get into the NHS, and then once you're in, to be able to develop within that role, gain your experience, and also gain any additional training or qualifications, which then sort of really opens things up to keep moving and progressing within your career, if that's what you want to do. Then on the clinical side, again, all of those professions are degree related. So it may be that you might have a wide range of there's all sorts of degrees, but if now at this point you're thinking, oh, I'd really like to be a nurse, or I'd really like to work in the field of psychology, it might be that you consider again an entry-level role to get you into the NHS and to get you some health and care experience, and that role in our trust is a healthcare support worker role. So for example, if you were to come and be a healthcare support worker, get some experience of working in health and care and directly supporting somebody, you would then that then opens up pathways for example, if you're interested in nursing, pathways to train to be a nursing associate or an associate practitioner. That they're both 2-year training courses available as apprenticeships, which would then enable you to be a registered nursing associate or associate practitioner. And with some experience in that role, you would then be able to do a top-up, another 2-year top-up course. And at the end of all of that, that would be a route to being a registered nurse, if that's something that you're interested in. So just to tell you a little bit more about the healthcare support worker role. So you would be working alongside the nurse or the allied health professional within the multidisciplinary team to deliver direct care to our service users. And you'll learn to support people with many aspects of their day-to-day living, helping them to take care of themselves and to live a fulfilled life. So just to give you an example of some of the tasks that you might be involved in, and obviously that what you're actually doing will very much depend on the individual that you're supporting and also the environment that you're working in. But there's a huge range of tasks. So they might include, for example, washing somebody and supporting them to get dressed and ready for the day, maybe making meal choices or helping them to prepare snacks, monitoring somebody's physical health, or maybe accompanying them outside of the trust, maybe to go to the shops, maybe to visit their home, or go to the cinema. That job, a healthcare support worker role, the starting salary for that role is £19,737. So just to tell you a little bit about, I don't know how much you know about apprenticeships, but we use apprenticeships in the trust both as entry routes into the organisation, but we also use them to develop our existing staff. An apprentice healthcare support worker is one of our most common apprenticeships, and an apprenticeship is a paid role in an organisation while undertaking a role-related qualification. 20% of your time in apprenticeship has to be evidenced as being in training or development, and on average an apprenticeship is 2 years long, and some programs will contain a rotational element which will enable you to move around an organisation and maybe get some experience of the different areas and departments. If apprenticeships is something that you might be looking at, just some of the benefits that you could consider that will give you is it's a route to, as we said, to gain that really valuable work experience in the area that you're interested in. It gets you into an organisation where you can develop your relationships and your contacts. As an apprenticeship comes with a robust support network, so you'll have an allocated mentor in the workplace, and you also have a tutor or a coach allocated to you from the learning provider. And obviously it's an opportunity to develop, but within the organisation. And then the final thing that I just wanted to say were just some of the benefits of working for the NHS. So we have a fair and transparent pay structure. We've got one of the most generous pension schemes on offer in all the sectors. We have good holidays and a standard working week of 37.5 hours, but then with pay enhancements for any additional hours or overtime that you might do. We have a health service discount scheme, flexible working opportunities, and finally we're really committed to supporting people in their continuous professional development, CPD, and also career progression within the organisation and the NHS as a whole. And that is it from me.
Hi, so I guess it's over to me. So hello everyone, I'm Zoe McAndrews, I'm a clinical psychologist. So I think one of the things that kind of sticks out is that psychology opens up many doors, and that can be a wonderful and quite daunting thing. But one of the more traditional kind of roles within an NHS setting is an assistant psychologist. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that role today. So to be an assistant psychologist, you will need a recognised degree, often with the British Psychological Society. I can't talk this morning. However, what we know is a lot of people come to psychology later or as a second career, or have done kind of a combined undergraduate. So you can do a conversion course, which is offered at master's and postgraduate diploma level. And it's not all about academia. So it is an important component, but assistant psychologists have a number of skills that are really, really valued as part of that role and in the NHS more broadly. So I guess it's distinct from other roles in that there's a particular emphasis on some understanding of psychological theories and models, and the role then supports you to develop how you might put them into practice. We work with people from a wide variety of backgrounds. So, for example, in clinical psychology, we're trained to work from very young age. I know they said birth, but we don't tend to do that so much, right up to kind of older adults with wide range in complex physical, emotional, complex needs. Ironically, ability to communicate effectively, which I think I'm struggling with this morning. But we have to talk about quite a lot of sensitive stuff with people. We have to write reports. So I work in the forensic service. So my client, if you like, is sometimes the patient in front of me, sometimes it's the Ministry of Justice, and being able to communicate that information is a big part of the role. And I think another thing that's really, really prized in psychology particularly is supervision. So that ability to kind of sit and reflect and think about the processes and what's happening. And lots of other stuff, but I think they're the key bits of kind of what we start to look for when we're hiring assistant psychologists, and also what we would nurture and develop in people in that role, because it's something that carries through your psychological career. I can go to the next slide. Thank you. And part of me really wanted to kind of say, this is what an assistant role looks like, but I can't do that because as kind of Claire and Joe have already mentioned about the trust, we have lots of different settings. So the one commonality of an AP is that you work under supervision of a qualified psychologist, but the specifics vary a lot depending on the population and the setting in which you'll be working. But as a broad brush, generally you'd be involved in undertaking and supporting assessments. So that might include assessments of cognition or neurological functioning. We might look at kind of behavioural observational assessments and more functional analysis type things. We use lots of psychometrics, from the kind of simplest 0 to 10 scale right through to some very complex batteries. A big part is supporting formulations, so that kind of hypothesis and shared understanding of what's going on for people. We do lots of therapeutic groups, and some of them are quite protocol driven, some of them are much more process therapy wise. We again do that on an individual level. There's lots of research, and again from very simple kind of audits and service evaluations through to opportunities to be involved in multi-site randomized control trials. Lots of file reviews, especially in a forensic service. People often have extensive history, so there's lots of going through information and trying to make sense of that to inform what we do now. And you're a really valued part of a multidisciplinary team as an assistant psychologist, bringing that kind of unique psychological perspective, sharing it with the team and thinking about how we go forward. So if people have already mentioned, in Leeds and York, we have quite a vast range of services, and we definitely currently have roles for assistant psychologists we have people in employment in older people's. We have someone who works here with me at Clifton House in forensic services. There will be involved in the gambling service, perinatal, and our personality disorder specific service. And I think there will be opportunities in the veteran pathway as well once that's more established. So I guess that's one of the lovely things. You can kind of move around and see what works for you and get lots of different experience, because as I'm sure you can imagine, all of those settings offer something quite unique. So for example, our previous assistant psychologist, who is now on clinical training, her and I worked together with a man who had a very, very complex history, had been in and out of different services, and there wasn't really a good psychological understanding of what was going on. People just got very annoyed at him. There was lots of kind of blaming, ideas around his behaviours, and it was really hard for the team to engage him. So our assistant psychologist did a thorough notes review, which was quite extensive, but to try and pull out the information of what had gone before, what we tried, what hadn't worked, what got stuck, what happened at kind of key periods in his care. And then she did a lot of psychometric assessments, so everything from kind of basic mood assessments to personality assessments, some kind of cognitive functioning. And together we did a joint clinical interview over a number of weeks to build up a picture. And we managed to pull all of that in together to do kind of a formulation which served two functions. One was to kind of go, what is happening for this guy, and try and understand him a little bit more, because that influences how we deliver care. But then also think about, well, what happens for him? That means something unhelpful can play out in a system. So what gets in the way of him receiving the care that he needs? And actually that meant we were able to bring that to the MDT to think about this from a different perspective. And he was able to successfully engage in some treatment, attend a group, which had never worked before, and kind of break that vicious cycle of disengagement and discharge, relapse and readmission. And our assistant psychologist, who's currently in post, has given us this quote of her experience of working in forensic services, and I think it just is testament to how diverse and varied and rewarding the role can be. Because I think we do hold a privileged position as psychologists. We get to work with people and witness parts of their lives, and it's worth it, I would say. So I think last slide from me. As I said, part of me would love to give you all of the options, but I have 5 minutes and that's just not a thing. So in the NHS, we generally have psychologists who have gone down the forensic, health, clinical or counselling arm in terms of the on-the-ground clinical services, but obviously we have occupational psychologists working in HR type settings and other bits and pieces. But and neuro, I missed neuro, we have neuropsychologists as well. But obviously psychology opens up a whole host of pathways. If you are interested in the clinical arm, so that second flow chart on the right hand side of this slide kind of gives you a typical journey. It's not that neat, it's much more kind of meandering, and it also doesn't include our IAP services, which again is a really big it's been around for a while now actually, but again more of a therapy aim, so a CBT emphasis. But there's the PWP option as well, and I've put some references down there just if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about what can feel like a long journey, but as I said, it's a very rewarding one. So I know that's an absolute whistle-stop tour of what an assistant psychologist might look like, but as I said, I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Zoe. And I think there was quite a lot of information in that particular role as well. So as Zoe said, there will be time at the end for questions and answers, and if not, then we can take it offline and answer any questions that you might have outside of today. So thank you very much. I'm going to talk to you just really quickly about our NHS graduate scheme. So this isn't unique to Leeds and York. This is a national scheme that's offered by NHS trusts that opt in for the scheme, and it's a 2-year graduate programme. Now it's open to students from any discipline, so it doesn't matter what subject you're studying at the moment, as long as you secure a 2-2 in terms of your degree classification, then you would be you'd meet the entry requirements for this particular scheme. It's a 2-year programme, and it's ranked really high. It's ranked top 4 out of all of the leadership development programmes in the whole of the UK, so really well recognised. So with it being a management training scheme, it's really about, if you've got a particular interest in a certain sector or specialism, which there's 6 specialisms that form part of the NHS scheme, and they're detailed at the bottom of the slide. Then you would be able to apply for the NHS graduate programme, and specifically a specialism that you were interested in developing. At Leeds and York, we are currently recruiting for the human resource management specialism, so we've got a position on the scheme to come and work within our human resource team. As part of the 2-year programme, you would have at least 2 placements. They could be at 2 different trusts, or there will be at 2 different trusts, but they might be in 2 completely different locations. So upon the point that you apply, you would be able to specify geographically which region you were interested in, and then as part of the shortlisting, we would endeavour to prioritise what your preference is, to make sure that you're either close to home, or if you're really interested in relocating, whatever that might be. During the scheme, you'd also complete at least 1 professional qualification, which again would be linked to your specialism of choice. So if you were thinking about, for example, going down the human resources management route with ourselves, then we would look at offering a Masters in Human Resource Management, for example. Really good starting salary, so you're looking at around £2,500 per year, and then dependent on where you're based, there's potentially location allowances available as well. So applications are open at the moment for our September 21 intake. So if you've just come into your final year of university, then that's potentially something that you could start as soon as you graduate. They are closing mid-December, so it's open for another month or so. So again, if you are interested in that, then I'd encourage you to go online and have a look at the NHS Graduate Management Scheme. You apply through the national scheme, and as I say, you preference any particular trusts or locations that you're interested in as you go through that process. Ian unfortunately has dropped off. I think he's having technical issues, so apologies. So I'm going to just do this bit for him. Ian's our recruitment and resourcing manager, so he manages the team that does all the operational side of recruitment. So in terms of processing applications, processing DBS checks. And Ian really wanted to come along today and talk to you about the system that you would need to use to apply for any positions within Leeds and York. This is the application software that we use. Many other NHS trusts will use the same, so it might be, if you are interested in applying for a role, it might be worthwhile just familiarising yourself with the system and what that looks like and working your way through. All of our roles are advertised via NHS Jobs. You can also view all of our adverts through Leeds and York's website, and many of them are on Indeed as well. So hopefully you're familiar with those websites, especially if you are interested in a career in the NHS. You can also register for job alerts. So by going on and creating an account via Leeds and York's website and the system that we use, which is called Track, you can register for any job alerts. So if you go on there and there's no vacancies at the moment that you're particularly interested in, but you've got a certain vacancy that you're really aspiring for, you can go on and tick this certain criteria that you're interested in, and then when a vacancy is posted on the system, you'll automatically be notified by your email. So again, it just stops you having to check every single day. We'll proactively get in touch with you. So this is just a bit of an overview and screenshot of what that looks like in practice. Hopefully, I'm sure you're all IT savvy after doing all of your assignments and dissertations and everything, so I won't talk to you about it too much. But again, if you do want any support with this, or if you've got any questions about the system usage, then we've got a dedicated team that would be happy to help. And this is where you go through and build up your own profile. So this is just specifying how you want to be contacted, if you want daily alerts, weekly alerts, whatever your preferences might be. And then again, just sort of where you could pick out certain disciplines that you're interested in and that you wanted to be notified of. This is just in relation to any particular salary that you're aspiring for. So if you've got a minimum criteria in terms of your expectations of income, then you can specify that on there. I guess just to caveat that with the entry routes that Joe mentioned, if you were looking to come in potentially at a healthcare support worker position, then it may be worthwhile just having a look at how the grades and the salaries bandings match those particular positions, so you're not getting notified about positions that you wouldn't be eligible for, and vice versa if you're getting notified about positions that you may be overqualified for as well. And then regionally as well, so you can specify here if you're particularly interested in staying in the area and working for Leeds and York, or if you're open to moving anywhere in the country, then you can select from a wide ranging regions, and then you literally just save your criteria and that's it. And then finally, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit around how you can make your application stand out. Now, I'm sure that Tim and the team at Leeds Trinity taught you about this kind of thing a lot, so hopefully it's a bit of a reiteration of everything that you already know, but I just wanted to really highlight what it is that us as a NHS Trust will be looking for in successful applications. So first of all, just around making a good first impression. So when you're completing your application form, that's the first, I guess, opportunity to showcase yourself in a light of a prospective employer. So it's just really important that when you go through an application, and I know that you might do a lot, and I know that they seem really long, but it's really important to pay attention and to actually put the time aside to complete every single section. Any errors or omissions or missing content or missing sections that aren't completed, it might be to your detriment, especially if we're receiving hundreds of applicants for one position. Then little things like that might sort of straight away mean that you go on the no pile rather than the yes pile, just out of the nature of the volume of applicants. So just please pay attention and please be accurate, because it really can make a difference. Make sure you check the closing date of a vacancy. You don't want to be rushing last minute to get your application submitted, because that might mean that you do make those errors, and you don't want to put that pressure on yourself either. You want to make sure you've got plenty of time to get that submitted. So when you see a role you're interested in, check when it's due to close and make sure you book some dedicated time out to go through that application process. You might not want to do it all at once. You might want to save your application and revisit it and get it to a draft version and get that checked over by maybe Tim and the team. So again, just make sure you're dedicating some time to go through it and giving yourself that time, so you're taking that stress away from yourself. The most important part of a job application is your personal statement. So within most job applications at the NHS or not, there is usually a requirement for you to complete an application form which would include a personal statement. So that's where you'd be able to evidence what skills you've got that meet the criteria of that job post. So when you're looking at applying for a role, it's really important to have a look at the job description and the personal spec to make sure that you're understanding what that employer is actually looking for from their desirable candidate. Usually within a personal specification, it does break down the criteria that they're looking for by knowledge, skills, experience, and within that it might be broken down into what is essential and what is desirable. Please don't ever be put off by any desirable criteria. It literally is that. It's what it says on the tin. It is desirable. And what I would say to you is that you don't know, out of every other applicant that's applying, that they don't have that desirable criteria either. So as long as you can evidence that you meet that essential criteria, we would always encourage you to still make that application. Within the personal specification, it's really important to dig down into what skills and experience the employer is looking for. And then within your personal statement, you need to evidence that you have got those skills and that experience. And it's not just a case of saying, I have got this, or yes, I tick that box. You really need to go into detail and give examples of times when you've demonstrated that in practice. So I'm just sharing with you now a technique that is used widely. It's recognised. It's actually how applications are scored. So for us as an employer, this is how we would determine if we will be shortlisting somebody for a job. So I can't stress this enough. You may well be familiar with this through the university and Tim and the team, but again, just to reiterate, if you are, that this is what employers look for. This will determine if you are shortlisted or not for an application. So just really want to stress that. So the technique is called the STAR technique. It can be used on application forms, but you can also use it in interviews as well. So if you are shortlisted and invited for a face-to-face interview, you can also use this technique in prepping for your interview answers within a competency-based interview scenario. So in terms of STAR, so S stands for situation, so where you were working, what you were doing, what role. If you've not got any work experience, it doesn't always need to be a work example either. So just to stress that, it's just important that you've got the examples ready and you're able to think about what skill the question or the application is asking for. T is for task, so what your task you were challenged with. Again, this needs to relate to whatever part of the personal spec you're addressing, and I'll explain that in a bit more detail on the next slide. A is for action, so this is specifically what you did to offer resolve to that challenge, and it's not around what we did or what the team did, it's about you. So just in terms of the language that you're using, making sure that you're using I, and taking ownership of those examples and really demonstrating what skills you used. And then the R is the outcome, so the result of what actions you put in place and how that resulted in the resolution of the situation. So just a quick example here. So if you were looking at some essential criteria on a personal spec that was referencing that you must have experience communicating in a challenging situation, then I've just put an example there underneath. I won't read it out to you because I'm sure you can all read it, and I'm more than happy to share the slides with Tim for him to circulate to the attendees on the call today. But it just gives a really good example of how you're addressing that particular essential criteria through the use of the STAR technique and giving that detail that would mean that you were able to evidence that you meet that criteria and therefore result in you being shortlisted. Now, the example I've given here is whilst working as a sales assistant at Morrison's. And the reason that I've done that is just, I guess, to relate to the fact that, you know, if you're applying for a role as a healthcare support worker, it's really important that you would have strong communication skills, and that would form part of the essential criteria. You don't have to give an example of when you've worked in a care role in the past to be able to evidence that you can communicate. There's lots of transferable skills that might be available through part-time jobs that you've done around your degree. It might even be, you know, during my time as a student at Leeds Trinity, and you can give examples of where you've worked in peer groups with other students, where maybe you've worked as an ambassador. Any experience that you've got that would demonstrate that you have good communication skills is what we'd be looking for here. So that's just to give you a really quick example and using that STAR technique to put that into practice, really.